Hello, welcome to the show. It's myself, Jon Norman, Jarrod Kimber. This is following on India, and we are going to start with that test match. It even got written about. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Daily Mail in India or Bangladesh, wherever you're watching this, but it even got written about in the Daily Mail. Essentially, that win for India over Bangladesh, there is a line in the sand, and it is not before and after BazBall. It is before and after Gazball or Gabiball, whatever. But essentially, that's going to be the most historic test match ever in the history of the game. 2,500 tests in. That's it.
We're done.
Yep. Well, no, not even that. Actually, it's not like that's it. We're finished. It's like now we go again.
I can't wait for all the editorials that say Test Cricket 2.0. Because I feel like we've missed that one so far. Look, I do think it's a historic test match. I don't think it's any more historic than the Royal Pindi Test match where England went crazy bananas.
I totally agree.
But I think they're both
comparisons.
They're both slightly different only because England was always ahead, so there was no real risk in what England were doing in that way. Whereas obviously it's very, very different in this situation where India are like, we might have to end up not having a lead on the first innings here, and we might get bowled out for 50 runs less than than we thought, and all those sorts of things. But I think those two test matches in the space of 2 years shows where the sport is going and where it's been going for a long time. And I did some work on this, having a look at, so when Test cricket started, we went at about 2 runs and over, right?
Yeah.
And at that stage, to be fair, the batters were lucky to stay in, let alone do anything else. And then we had a period where we went at about 2.5 runs and over from World War I through to probably almost 70s or 80s, I think. So a long period of time where that was the scoring rate, more or less. We had a couple of lower decades, but it never really got above that. And then Australia in the 2000s kind of changed everyone's opinion, and they get it up to 3. And then for the last 20 years, it's been roughly at 3. Well, the last 2 years of Test cricket, it's at basically 3.5. So we've gone a run and a half up and over from where we started in Test cricket. And we've had a huge jump in the last couple of years. But the funny thing is, John, is we haven't had a jump in the batting averages. Batting averages actually this year are down. The average in Test cricket history is about 32. They're 28 this year. It's quite low. So teams are attacking, but they're not staying in that much. But the pressure they're putting back on bowlers is still being felt. And when it's a good side against a poor side, and BazBall is a perfect example of this, you can really cause some damage. And you're watching Bangladesh out there. And it reminded me exactly, and I'm sure you remember this as well, of how New Zealand bowled against England in Nottingham, right? Well, we were sitting there going, oh my God, just bowl like it's a T20 game. What are you guys doing? Just bowl like it's one day or a T20. And New Zealand were like, no. This is Test cricket. We're going to continue to hit a length here. And you're like, you're going to continue to be hit into the stands here. What are you thinking? Bowl wide Yorkers, right? Like, and that is what you're watching Bangladesh, and it's the same sort of thing. So even when and India aren't a good example of this because their batting is so much higher than England's and so much higher than most teams in the world. But even when you're watching a team go through something like that, like a lot of the teams, Pakistan have tried it at times, Zimbabwe have tried it at times, England have tried it, which is we're not very good at batting in red ball cricket. Maybe if we up the rate, we can put pressure back on the bowlers. Teams are doing that. And then the other big change is, I think we're in the first generation of players who probably, most cricketers who are playing professional cricket at the moment were born after 1990, right? Like the vast majority of professional cricketers born after 1990. That's a really important date because the 90s is when ODI cricket takes over, right? I know Test cricket is bigger than ODI cricket now, but it wasn't for a very long time. One-day cricket was especially in Asia, was the dominant form. And then T20 cricket takes over off the back end of that. That means there's a whole generation of cricketers who've grown up playing result-based cricket.
Right?
Where you have to win. I mean, we can't even have a tie.
No draws, right?
We can't even have a tie anymore, right? We have to have a super over. We've just gone away from that thinking in cricket altogether. And so you put all those things together and you can talk about, batters are more aggressive because they've grown up in that era. And now instead of sitting there and trying to do the sort of BJ Watling, Craig Brathwaite thing, modern cricketers are like, they're going to Ollie Pope it. They're just going to reverse sweep and charge down a wicket and hope it works so that they can get their runs that way. In the end, these players probably all end up averaging about the same as they would have anyway, but that's a different conversation for another day. But what but all these things are happening, and then you have the World Test Championship, which of course you're playing for points, and not every team takes it seriously. I think it will be one of the funniest things in cricket this year if somehow India and South Africa end up in the final. You've got one team who is desperate to win the World Test Championship final, and another team who was like, we don't take Test cricket seriously. We're sending a C team to play New Zealand, which will be just mind-boggling. But that's the situation that we're in. So all these different things are coming together, and Rawalpindi was an example of a lot of those things. And this is, I think, a more extreme example, in part because, Bangladesh did have runs on the board, and India did lose some wickets. And it would have been very easy to just be like, let's slow down. But specifically, what I found the most interesting is that they scored at 8 runs and over.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the fastest runs per over of any score over 100, I think, right? So it's not, even when we've had short innings in Test cricket, no one's ever scored at this rate before. So it's the fastest over 100, 150, 200, any metrics you can get it up to, right? And why I think this is really interesting is if you were trying to score at 8 runs and over 15 years ago, you would have had to slog. They didn't slog. They batted in a way that you would expect a team who's trying to push the foot down in an ODI game, or a team on a flat pitch in a T20 team to bat. There wasn't like, do you remember in the 90s, if you wanted to see him try and set a total, like everyone would just swing the ball to mid wicket over and over again and hit a couple of sixes, miss-hit a couple, and then get bowled, right? Like, watch the way India went about it. So we are watching the evolution of the sport through all those things that I said before, and bigger bats and stronger batters and all these sorts of things that came together in this one game. And I think even more so than Rawalpindi, because India went further with their scoring rates. And also, the other thing that I would say is that India did it partly because Test cricket has changed because of the World Test Championship. So I think these are games that we should be talking about in the future, because I think this is where we're heading.
Am I wrong in kind of feeling that it would be a good thing for India to continually lose the World Test Championship final? Because as long as they lose, they're going to be desperate to win it. And as long as they're desperate to win it, it's going to exist. As soon as they win it, then they've won it, and they're not going to care quite so much. And then maybe it won't exist.
I don't know. I mean, why is India at the moment, right? Forget the social and the financial clout that they have as a country and the population and everything else, but the way they are intrinsically important to cricket is because they won the 1983 World Cup, right? If, I don't know, West Indies just play a normal game in that, West Indies should have won that World Cup. They should have won like 4 or 5 World Cups really up until 1996. Like we don't talk about that because they were so dominant in Test cricket. But West Indies really underperformed in ODI cricket compared to how good they were compared to every other team. So I think if West Indies win that, maybe India's rise in cricket and the changes we've seen within cricket and the money that's come into the game doesn't come in, right? Or doesn't come in at the same rate, or doesn't come in as quickly, or everything else. So there's a part of me that thinks it is important that the T20 World Cup was given more importance because India won the first one, right? The IPL comes off the back of that. So I get your general point. I like the idea of them constantly, maybe, if we could constantly make them get the final and then not win.
And
there's
lose
an element there of they're going to keep going for it. But I actually think that if they win it, like, there's a lot of Indian fans who are just upset that they haven't won one yet because they know how dominant their team is, and that's probably fair. And there are a lot of Indian fans who are like, why does it keep getting played in England? And I'm like, if India wanted to host it, they could.
I think they are. I think they're going to host the 2027 version.
Yeah, so they will. But the point being is, it's not like it's a big conspiracy. Basically, England and India are the only 2 places who've shown any major interest in wanting to host this thing. And India didn't show any interest for a little while. And so England does what they do. They put as many in the books as they could before someone else noticed.
Yeah, and what England's like? They plan so far ahead. Yeah. It's kind of like, oh no, we've already worked this one out, guys.
Whereas the rest of the cricket world's like,
up to 2031.
The rest of the cricket world's like, what are we doing next week? And England's like, we're 2031. We've got all these things in our book. So I do think there's an element of, like, it hasn't been played in the right place, and they've also gone up against 2 fantastic teams. it's probably better for cricket that they have lost 2 so far, but I don't think it's better for cricket if they keep losing. I think there is an element of they are the best team in Test cricket, and I think you kind of want them to win to justify that. And then if they're the best team in Test cricket, it's about legacies. I remember when Sachin was retiring, it was like there was a lot of people who were like, "I'm never going to follow cricket again. Sachin is retiring," and I was like,
I felt the same way when Alex Stewart retired.
"Well," and I get that as a fan, but what I was saying is
the next year was 2005 Ashes. There's always something, right?
And that's the point. But what I was saying to Sachin fans at that time was, yeah, but then you're not honoring his legacy. His legacy doesn't mean anything, Sachin Tendulkar, right? If you don't keep watching Test cricket and ODI cricket, right? Like if all these people disappear, and it's a bit the same with India. If they don't, they are now very big chance of being, they've won 2 ODI World Cups. They've won 2 T20 World Cups. And they've won, and they haven't won the World Test Championship. So let's say they win a World Test Championship in the next 4 years, which is a very, strong possibility. That legacy, you need to keep following the sport. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you all just decide, we only care about the IPL anymore. Then it doesn't matter if India won any of those tournaments, and it does to India, the nation, right? Like, there is a nation building aspect of cricket. So I do think that it matters more that they do win eventually. But I get your wider point, which is I think India are the most desperate team to win the World Test Championship, and maybe have been from the start, right? New Zealand I think New Zealand looked at their first schedule and went, "Oh, we've got a sneaky chance here of getting through." Yeah. But I think India's another one, and Rahul Dravid mentioned it at the World Cup trophy ceremony, didn't he? I think he might have mentioned it then and there, just saying, go and get that World Test Championship that we couldn't get, right? So it's on their minds, whereas England seemed to just be morally trying to win cricket, but not actually trying to win the big trophy that everyone else is playing for.
Good stuff. Let's get a Bangladeshi take on that incredible result in Kanpur. A few moments ago, I caught up with the Bangladeshi correspondent at ESPNCricinfo, Mohammad Isam. Mohammad, thanks for joining us. We spoke before the start of the series, and we asked the question, what would signify success? I don't think anybody really felt that Bangladesh were going to win 2-0. I think we all felt that 1-1 would be a fantastic result, but we also pointed to a series between India and New Zealand in 2021, which saw New Zealand leave with a 1-0 series defeat. And that kind of felt, because India are so strong, that kind of felt like a kind of win. After competing for the first couple of days in the first test, and giving India a real scare, your thoughts on how it all unraveled in Kanpur, and the feeling off the back of that 2-test series?
Yeah, I mean, from a cricketing point of view, it was very disappointing because if you just look at the skill level of the two teams, it was quite evident that Bangladesh they came with a bit of form, and they reduced India to 144 for 6 on the first day in Chennai. And then how Ravichandran Ashwin and Ravindra Jadeja took the game away from Bangladesh just showed that, when you're facing up to a great opponent, you even fall short. And Bangladesh were obviously not in the same league as India, but they did threaten them for a while in that test match, and that was it. I think Bangladesh didn't grow complacent from that point. I think they were still trying hard, but when it's India, it's India. You have to respect the fact that they fought back very well. But I think the series was lost for Bangladesh, at least, with the way they batted, the way they looked so, like headless chickens against this brilliant bowling attack. But, they could have applied themselves better, I felt, that they gave up too easily. I think that was the big takeaway from this series. And that's what even the coach said after the Kanpur test, that they didn't go deep into a bowler spell or force a bowler into a second spell. It just happened in the first over. I mean, they just gave up too quickly. Maybe because they were facing India, maybe also because of the fact that they've never beaten India in a test match. That also works. But all in all, I think it was quite a wretched time for Bangladesh in India.
I was at the Adelaide Oval in 2006. England had scored 550. It's a very famous test match. I'm sure you remember it. England scored 515, they declared. Australia then hit 500 and they declared. And I went along to the Adelaide Oval for the first and only time with a book under my arm and just thought I was just going to sit there and watch a draw. And then I got to the ground, and within about 20 minutes of that final day, that final fateful day, England, who were only one down, I think they were like 50 for one overnight. So they led by 100 going into day 5 with 9 wickets in hand. And within about 20 minutes of that day, I knew, the whole Barmy Army knew, the players knew, the Australian fans started to know that England were going to lose that match. And they did so in ways that still give me nightmares the best part of 20 years later. At what point did you know that Bangladesh were going to lose that second test match?
I think the moment Rohit Sharma hit that 6 of Khalid Ahmed, I think the first over went for a few runs, but still, it can happen in the first over. 2 boundaries is okay. But when he slammed him for a straight 6, I thought this was going to be a different test match. Of course, the time was, you think about these things. You imagine that a team could do this. No one has ever tried this. I don't think any team has missed this much. They could have lost the game because Bangladesh doesn't have a really bad bowling attack. I thought Hassan Mahmood and Khalid are good bowlers. But the way they took them down, and then it was all catch up for Bangladesh because they batted differently. Then they had to bring the spinners in. They had Taijul, who was playing after a long time. Miraj, who didn't bowl well in the previous test match. Shakib didn't bowl that well in the previous test match. So you had that lack of confidence that India really pounced on. I think the initial attack, that 3 overs, or the 2 fast bowlers going for so many runs in their first spell, that really destroyed their confidence. And Bangladesh just couldn't play catch up. You can't play catch up to that sort of approach, I felt. And that's what they paid quite heavily. And honestly, it was a pleasure to watch that test match. It's a pity that it happened against Bangladesh, but it was just so refreshing to see a team, risk it all just to win a test match.
It brought back memories of the 2016 T20 World Cup when Bangladesh needed 1 run from 3 balls and some against India in India. Is it just that? Would Bangladesh have lost to any other side in the world but India?
They have the propensity to leave it late and then lose. They have missed a few opportunities like that. Of course, that Bangalore nightmare is a historic one, but I think Kanpur was a bit more, a little more technical in the sense that India planned it so well. They took a chance. They lost wickets, but I mean, the gulf between the two sides, you could just see what India were trying and what Bangladesh were failing to see. I mean, you felt helpless. The bowlers looked very ordinary in that situation. But this is the same team that went into a test match, just 1 test match ago against Pakistan, twice, in fact, in Rawalpindi, on the last day with no hope of a result. And they churned out the wickets and they won that game. It happened in Rawalpindi in the first test match. Even in the second test match, they chased a 4th innings total of 180, I think. So these are also impossible things, or things that Bangladesh have not done before, but they have done it against Pakistan. And then to come here and see the other end of that stick, that was quite disappointing for Bangladesh, I think.
Tell me about your reaction to that Khalid Ahmed missed run out, because I watched it. I was at the News Corps building. I was in the canteen. I was about to film something with Jarrod and David Bumble Lloyd, and I was just watching it, and nobody else was. I was surprised it was even on, right? It was just on the screen where I was sat, and I was just watching it. And I shouted out. I was like, oh no, when I saw him miss that run out. And suddenly I was really aware I'm just the only person in the canteen watching India against Bangladesh. And everybody else is kind of looking at me odd. What was your reaction to that moment?
Just, I felt bad for Khalid, actually. He's a genuine trier, honest trier. But, coming into the team after such a gap, with so much, he was under pressure because he was replacing Taskin Ahmed. Nahid Rana was also playing, so he would have been feeling the pinch, and that was the big moment. He had Virat Kohli stranded. He could have run him out, and he just couldn't do it. And he has that fast bowler's propensity to blow up. There's that odd misfield at times, but it's a very good bowler. But just unfortunate the way he fielded that ball. And, he had picked it up properly. He just should have run and hit the wicket. He just missed the stump. That was awful, absolutely awful.
To finish up, the announcement that Shakib Al Hasan is set to retire from international Test, and I think he's played his last T20. I think he's going to continue playing ODIs, but essentially he's going to be going back to Bangladesh. He's going to have one more Test match against South Africa. How will he be remembered? I know it's a tumultuous time at the moment, so pushing politics to one side, I know that's not always possible, but how will his career for Bangladesh be looked back on in years to come?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, I've covered cricket for 18 years, it's close to 20 years now. So I don't think there has ever been a cricketer like him in Bangladesh's history. And not even the word arguably comes. He is the greatest cricketer in Bangladesh's history. He was, I think, number one in one of the rankings. I think one of the 3 formats, he was number 1 for almost 4 years, all-rounder rankings. And that's just one of those things. He won so many games for Bangladesh. He showed them a new way to play cricket. The asterisk is not going to be his political career, but the moment in July when the student protests were going on, still, it's been, 2.5 or 3 months now, August, September, October, 3 months. He hasn't uttered a word about it. I think that's where people are not going to remember him in a great light. I mean, you said, let's keep the politics aside. Okay, let's keep the politics aside, but
it's
as
not
a human
possible,
being,
is it? I know it was. No. It's not possible.
No, it's fine. I mean, he's had a match fixing charge against him. The ICC punished him for a year. He's kicked the stumps. He's done so many things. People have forgiven him for everything. I think I got annoyed when he became too famous after the match fixing incident. I think he became too popular in Bangladesh. But this one, I think this is where he ends. See, unlike all other Bangladeshi cricketers, he's retiring in a good way. He's already said this is going to be my last Test match. It's very hard to get players to retire in Bangladesh. But all things aside, great cricketer, probably the greatest cricketer. Actually, not probably. He is the greatest Bangladeshi cricketer of all time. But that one part of his humanity that comes into the picture, it's not politics. It's that his human side doesn't always sit well with people. So his fans, or the general fans of Bangladesh, are going to be a little skeptical when they talk about Shakib. But no doubt about it, on the field, the greatest cricketer in Bangladesh.
Mohammad, Isam, Bangladeshi correspondent for Cricinfo. Thanks so much for your time. So that's the Bangladeshi take on Shakib Al Hasan. And as you'd expect, he was very fair and considered, a great player. Been involved in too many on and off field situations.
Modern cricket, who's the player that has the better biopic than Shakib Al Hasan?
In modern cricket?
So Warren is the last one, right? Like, Warren was the one that everyone went nuts for, and obviously his story went up and down and sideways and squished in all sorts of directions.
Rishabh Pant will be, I am sure.
Yeah, but Rishabh Pant is more of one. Kemar Roach and Rishabh Pant both had to come back from horrific traffic accidents, and I suppose you could throw Nicholas Pooran in there as well. That's one.
Ben Stokes.
Yeah, but he's up there. I think Shakib is
just throwing him out there. Jesse Ryder.
Jesse Ryder's not a bad one, actually. So
he's still playing.
So think about Shakib. He once was suspended for pointing to his groin on camera.
Hey, who hasn't been suspended for doing that?
He's the first person to be to appeal for a timed out in an international game.
Yeah.
There's fixing things. There's fixing things on both sides. I think he was at one stage a player who had been approached before for fixing and been very, very honest with it. And then the second time he didn't do that. You've got the whole Bangladesh thing of him being a politician while playing for Bangladesh. And then the government that he is a politician of is literally overthrown. Mm-hmm. He recently had a game in the Canada T20. I don't know if you followed this at all, but it was hilarious where literally to this day, I've talked to like 10 people involved in that, and everyone has a different story of what happened. But essentially, he was the captain of a team who didn't play in a game, who should have qualified for the finals and didn't because people were changing boundaries, and it was going to be a 1-over game, which it blows my mind. Everything that Shakib is involved with ends up being quite big. You go back to the India Bangladesh rivalry when Mustafiza was on top. Like Shakib is like a big part of that rivalry at that stage. And then the next big rivalry in cricket that we don't talk about enough is Bangladesh-Sri Lanka. Shakib could not be any more involved with that. And that is a huge thing. I remember him saying things about the Afghanistan. Like he's just everywhere at all times. And he's probably one of the best ODI players of all time. Like he's so underrated as an ODI player and a fantastic test player as well. But because he's come from Bangladesh, like most of his best stuff is just completely ignored by the wider cricket community. And he was a great player in a side that was pants, right? He's like the Andy Flower of Bangladesh, right? Except that Andy Flower would never point at his groin on camera.
Good stuff. Let's. I'll tell you what. He's going to end up on the Legends League circuit. So see what I'm doing there. We've got another guest joining us. Abhishek Jhunjhunwala, former ICL, former IPL, former India A, is out there in India right now covering the Legends League. So we caught up with him. Well, I'm delighted to say that a friend of talkSPORT 2, talkSPORT's cricket output is with us now, Abhishek Jhunjhunwala. In India at the moment, you're on the Legends League tour. You were playing, weren't you? You were playing last time. Have you been demoted to the commentary?
No,
or are you
I
playing
have, because unfortunately my base price apparently was too high for them to buy me. And then I was offered to play at a cheaper option. And you know me, John. Yeah, I don't play for cheap.
You know your worth, Abhishek, and you're right.
You got to.
I was cheering you on when you played. Last time you didn't play and then you hit 80 odd. I was like, yes, he's back. And then you were dropped.
Yeah.
Madly
no, I wasn't dropped.
game.
There's a story behind it.
Go on.
They forgot to write my name on the team sheet. And I was padded up to bat at number 3. And I saw a lot of people discussing a lot of chaos going on. And I didn't know what's going on, to be honest, till then. And then the coach walked up to me and said, mate, I'm really sorry, but I have to break a news to you. I'm like, what happened? But your name is not on the team sheet. We forgot to write your name.
It's quite a long name.
To be honest,
They just gave up.
They just was like, nah, too long, too many letters. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
But you're on the side. I mean, I saw some photos. Georgie Heatham's out there with you as well. She's doing the commentary. I mean, the crowds for it look balmy.
Oh, it's crazy. At the moment, I think there will be 15,000-20,000 people coming and watching every game. It's amazing. And also the way they do it in the smaller cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities. So they target the right audience for it as well. But again, you've got some of the biggest names in the industry playing and people will come and watch.
Oh, mate, it looks great. It looks absolutely great. We kind of had one this year, didn't we? You were doing commentary for it up at Edgbaston and then suddenly it moved to Northants. And look, it looked great when India were playing Pakistan, but I was watching the national anthems of, rally around the West Indies. There looked some very cold former West Indies greats who, it didn't quite capture the spirit of the Caribbean, that's for sure. Anyway, you're out in India. Tell us a little bit about the reaction to that incredible second test win. I mean, that's off the scale as well, isn't it?
I mean, to be honest, a lot of people are calling that India started playing BazBall. I thought India's playing Gasball with Gambhir being out there in the helms.
They wouldn't have done that under Dravid, would they?
I mean, again, it was very entertaining to watch. Brilliant brand of cricket. And again, it shows that if people change their mentality and if they want to play that sort of a attacking brand of cricket in test cricket, that is possible. Depending where you're playing, you can't do it in all conditions, but then there are conditions where that particular style of cricket is well suited.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because all of us grew up watching, and for you playing first-class cricket. These sorts of things happen in first-class cricket all the time. There was a county game the other day where the two teams forfeited the second and third innings, right? They were just like, it's the only way we're going to get a game. We're going to do this. And, the old declaration bowling in county cricket, and, teams would often declare behind in shield cricket and first-class cricket all around the world. Because a lot of things have changed. The bats and white ball cricket and, BazBall obviously played a part. These guys growing up in T20 cricket, all these different things. But the World Test Championship means you're playing for points. And specifically, we know that Kohli and Rohit are desperate to make that final. A draw to them wasn't exactly what they were looking for. And so they were willing to risk losing to try and get a win, which is not how Test cricket has been played for about 147 years.
Yeah, I think there's a shift in mentality, and which is also a very positive thing for Test cricket. Because the way Test cricket is going, you want to make it more and more entertaining, and you want to get those people to come to the stadiums. And for India, that has been the biggest challenge, if you see, in the last 4 or 5 years, because of the IPL and the amount of money people spend on watching the IPL for those whole 2 months. A lot of people don't have that spare income, or even if they do have that spare money, they don't want to go and invest it in watching Test cricket. They rather wait for a T20 series. But if you play a brand of cricket like that, then that will get a lot of people into the stadium. And that's all what we want to see, because we love Test cricket more than any other format. So as players and journalists, we want to see people coming and supporting Test cricket more than any other format.
One of the I think Jarrod mentioned it. We were having a discussion with David Lloyd on Monday about underrated cricket grounds, and Jarrod was saying how there is a push from some quarters that India should play less Test cricket, or rather they should play Test cricket at less grounds. They should just be like in England. There should just be like 6 grounds, right?
Yeah.
But I was watching that second day in Kanpur, and they didn't get a lot of play. It might have even been day one, actually. It wasn't a weekend. It was rain affected. It looked pretty bleak. They were on and off the field. You knew that play was going to come to an end early, and yet the crowd was just crazy. There was such a good crowd, and as soon as you have that good crowd, it doesn't really matter what's on display. It does, but it just makes it relevant. It makes it interesting. And I suppose that's kind of what the Legends League is doing as well. I suppose I wouldn't say Kanpur's tier 2, tier 3, maybe you would, but it just shows the importance of playing Test cricket, pushing it out there, but also at accessible grounds.
I think so. I think for India, the way they can bring more and more people into watching Test cricket is by doing it in these sort of cities. Not do it in Mumbai, Kolkata. Yes, you can have, if you're playing 4 Test matches, you can have one big venue like a Mumbai or a Bangalore or Kolkata. But the rest 3, they should go to smaller places where you're guaranteed 30,000-40,000 people coming and watching, because they hardly get to see any cricket. And all these T20s and the IPL can be left for those bigger venues. So you'll always get that sort of a crowd in a place like Kanpur where you hardly ever see much cricket being played.
I'm pretty sure I heard Abby say no more cricket in Kolkata then. Was that his official stance?
No, I did not say no more cricket in Kolkata.
There's a clip for social media.
Yeah, if you're doing 4 or 5 Test match series with either England or Australia, South Africa, whoever, you can have 1 or 2 matches in the major cities and at least have 2 or 3 games in these smaller cities as well.
There's another argument here too as well of, if BCCI is going to play a game in Kanpur, they have to make sure that the facilities are up to scratch. And the problem with a lot of these smaller grounds is when it's sunny and whatever, you could play a Test match in somewhere like Scarborough or Beckenham next week. The problem is weather and training facilities and all those sorts of things. The BCCI are going to make a decision to play in Kanpur. They need to make sure that the drainage is also at international level, which clearly it was not.
Yeah, I think a lot of India at the moment, we are in Surat for the last 1 week, and we have only managed to get 1 game in the Legends League. 5 games have been washed out. So it's a bit unfortunate. No one expected this rain to come, and I think that's the reason when they scheduled all these games, they didn't really expect any rain.
Yeah.
Yes, your point is absolutely correct that they still have the drainage and they still have the facility, but I just think no one was prepared for it. Yeah.
What about that Test series with Bangladesh then? At the start of it, Jarrod and I went through all the teams and basically gave a kind of rating where they are and where they're going to get to. There was centuries for Gill and Pant in the first Test, and Rohit Sharma and Jaiswal got the sides off to a great start, and Kohli was there at the end of the second Test. The batting kind of answered. KL Rahul as well, of course. So that kind of all answered its own questions. Ashwin and Jadeja saved the Test match in the first Test. Bumrah did what Bumrah does.
Yeah.
The 2 interesting ones for me were Akash Deep, whose stock went up. Mohammad Siraj. There's the one that's always been the interesting one. Where do you sit with how his performances have stood up in those first 2 Test matches?
Yeah, I think he's got to do a bit better, because there are lots of players in the ranks in Indian cricket who are pushing him. And somebody like Akash Deep, who has been phenomenal in first-class cricket in the last few years for Bengal. He plays from Bengal. He's done really well. And hence, he's got an opportunity to play in the IPL. Did okay in the IPL. I wouldn't say he's been the world beater, but he's suited for red ball cricket. So if you ask me, Mohammad Siraj, yes, we know the quality he has. And he didn't perform badly. He performed pretty good. But it's just that I think he'll have to up his game when Mohammad Shami comes back into this fold again, which we are hoping it'll be very soon in Australia.
One question that I had, someone asked me this on one of my podcasts, which is, have we ever seen a test series, a 3-test series of modern times, where the result was so heavily predicted as India winning 3-0 against New Zealand? So obviously it hasn't happened. New Zealand could win 3-0, but it just feels like these test matches have already been played and New Zealand has already lost them. India is so far ahead of everyone else at the moment. Bangladesh turned up with a pretty decent side. You know, they bat to number 8. They had spinners who went in both directions. Their seam bowlers were on top of their games, and they still, after the first afternoon of the first test, were never in that series.
Yeah, I think, see, again, especially when you're playing in India, it's so difficult to beat India. And also the quality of players and also them understanding their role. Now, with R. Ashwin and Jadeja, you won't find 2 better spinners in world cricket under these conditions. And you look at that batting order. I mean, you get one person out, and it's hard to get everyone out without cheaply and without not them scoring runs. So but New Zealand again can surprise you. That's what they do whenever they play anywhere in any part of the world. Come ICC event, they always surprise you. They'll come for this test match. I know the prediction is 3-0, but I promise you they will surprise a lot of people in that test series.
Brilliant stuff. Abhishek, we'll let you go. I know you're flying off to watch the rain fall on another Legends League game somewhere in the world, but appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much, and see you guys soon.
So big thanks to Abhishek Jhunjhunwala. We're going to talk a little bit about the T20 World Cup, the Women's T20 World Cup, which gets underway this week. And India, of course, one of the, is the big 3 in women's cricket. It is the same as in men's cricket, but are they as, because I mean, Australia have dominated women's cricket for so long, in a way that India have, I suppose, in men's cricket.
Oh, it's not the same though, is it? Like,
not,
I think win-loss records, it's way different, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's Australia's, right? I mean, but if anybody's going to beat them, I know England are going into it with good squad and full of form and fitness, and they fancy it. I wonder whether they're going to be better in playing in the UAE than in Bangladesh as well. Where are India? How do you see India going?
Yeah, no, I think all 3 teams have a decent chance at winning it. It's funny, I do these team maps. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but we basically rate teams based on where they do good in a game and where they don't do good in a game. And like a circle like this is just like a normal cricket team, right? And the Australian one's like this all the way around. I think the worst they are in any period of the game is like 16% better than another team, right? Like it's so ridiculous how dominant they have been. But you look at England, I would argue that Sophie Ecclestone is probably the best bowler in the world at the moment. And, maybe she would have preferred to be in Bangladesh than Dubai, but there isn't that much between the two, right? I mean, her ability to hit the stumps I don't think I've ever seen a bowler hit the stumps as much as she does and keep the ball in play with the stumps at all times. So you always have to worry about that with her. England have this huge power in the middle because of, Natsiva Brunt. Very, 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 strong team overall. India's problems sort of traditionally have been maybe more to do with kind of the depth of their batting. Like if they lose 3 or 4 wickets traditionally, they could never find a keeper who could make any runs. And, I think there was a few different things there, but I think they've really strengthened their side quite a bit. And I think their bowling is really, really good as well. A couple of all-rounders available to them. So Australia probably should still be heavy favorites. I haven't looked at the odds or anything, but Australia should probably still be heavy favorites. But, you could have a lot of fun if you wanted to have a little cheeky wager on India and England. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think there's some value in that as well. And so the issue is that there's a sort of a rising of the weaker team. So Pakistan played really well against England over here a couple of months ago. And, we have seen some of the weaker teams come up, but we've also sadly seen probably South Africa on the decline. And New Zealand were a powerhouse of women's cricket for the first from the World Cup until, maybe 5-10 years ago. And they basically have 3 players now.
They're on on quite a mighty losing run, aren't they, New Zealand?
And they've lost to some teams that people don't necessarily expect to win women's cricket games, right? And, you know, I think there's some great signs with Bangladesh and Pakistan specifically. Obviously, Sri Lanka have Jamaria Tapatu, and she can beat teams on her own sometimes. Not that they don't have some other talent there as well. West Indies, some of their players retired, and they've come back for a World Cup. Hello, Ben Stokes. And that's what every cricketer in the world's going to do from now on, isn't it? They're just going to retire and come back. So, look, it's an interesting tournament. I think it's a real shame we can't have it in Bangladesh. It's going to end up in the UAE, and outside of perhaps the Indian and Pakistani games, I'm not sure what kind of crowds we're going to get there. I think we've got to be honest. We've got to lower our expectations. I think the pitches in the UAE, though, will be slightly better for women's cricket than the ones in Bangladesh. You know, you have a lot of women who bowl very low arm action finger spin. Like in Bangladesh, that's basically subterranean, right? It's going to go under the ground if you do that. So, you know, I think in UAE, maybe you get slightly more bounce, a slightly more natural level of bounce. But yeah, I find it hard to look beyond Australia, but I really like England's team, and I think India have a great chance as well. So there was the last couple of Women's World Cups, we've had some really interesting games. And so if nothing else, that's kind of what you want, right? You want a few games where you're not sure what the result is. And before that in women's cricket, I think it was too easy to predict before a game who was going to win and who was going to lose. We're getting to a point now where that is not as obvious, and I think that's a fantastic position to be in. I think the Pakistan women beat the South African women recently. Certainly in a game. I remember there was one game I was watching, and they beat them in it. Like, you know, that's not the sort of thing that we would be thinking would have happened 10 years ago.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, we're going to be talking about that when we're back in a week's time here on the show. It's we've got 2 weeks off between test matches, or 2 weeks from now anyway, until the first New Zealand test. We'll get a guest on from New Zealand this time next week. Tim Southey has stood down, maybe jumped before he was pushed as skipper. Talk about that. And look ahead to that. And also we'll be discussing the T20 series, which is about to get underway between India and Bangladesh. But for now, thanks for joining us here on Following on India.